Hey guys, it's Libby, and I'm here with a special guest today. It's my mom.
Hello.
And I recently lent my mom a bunch of books, so we thought we would review them together. This person made it. They are The Golem and the JINNI by HELENE Wecker, The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield, and Attack Your Mom, that's part of it. Winter Spell by Claire Legrand. And my mom is an excellent person to lend books to because as soon as you give them to her, she immediately reads them. So I appreciate that.
Well, sometimes it takes me longer, but it turns out when my daughter asks me to read books, I read them a lot faster.
That's because I pick the best books. So we're going to start off with a review of The Golem and the JINNI, and the other two will be in their own videos, otherwise this would be the longest video ever. So the first part of this video is going to be spoiler-free, and then we'll let you know when we're getting into the spoilery stuff, so everyone can watch the first part. Only people who have read it or don't care can watch the end part. So this book is mainly set in turn of the last century New York City. The Golem, one of our main characters, is named, for a certain value of named, Chava. She is a golem. There's a thing. A golem is a person, generally a man, but this time it's a woman, constructed out of clay and brought to life by Kabbalistic magic, and they are generally used as like work, easy sources of labor, but Chava was created to be someone's wife. And she and her husband, for a certain value of husband, are on the boat from Danzig, Germany to New York City when he dies. And golems are sort of bound to their master, so in theory Chava should only be hearing the thoughts and the needs of her husband who created her. But when he dies on the ship over there, she can suddenly hear everybody's thoughts. And this makes life in the teeming city of New York kind of difficult for her. Okay, maybe not. And eventually, as the story progresses, she encounters a JINNI named Ahmad, who Mom's going to tell you about.
The JINNI, Ahmad, shows up when a metal worker, Arbili, is given a flask to repair. He's a Syrian, he's living in New York in the little Syria area of the city, and he's given this copper flask which has some dings in it. He starts repairing it, and he sort of taps the metal once, and suddenly there's a blinding flash of light, and when he comes back to consciousness, a large naked man is lying on the floor. It turns out the JINNI was in the bottle, and now he's out of the bottle. He had been captured centuries before in the desert, and has been trapped in this bottle for, I think it's 800 years.
And so the book is about Chava and Ahmad sort of getting used to this new world that they live in. Chava, who's never experienced a world before, and Ahmad, who had experienced a very different world. And there's, of course, a bad guy who's trying to expose them because they have to keep their identity secret, which is sometimes very difficult because A, they don't sleep, they also don't eat, or they don't need to eat, and they can understand all languages. They don't even really notice when people are speaking to them in different languages. So.
And they can speak those languages back, so yeah. Suddenly Chava will find herself responding in Norwegian to a
very startled person.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, and then important things that we want you to know about this book so you don't get confused or just because they're interesting. I want to tell you that the Syrian community in New York is Christian, not Muslim. I assume that they would be Muslim because they're Middle Eastern and I am ignorant, but eventually you figure out that they are Christian. I want to say.
Yes, the thing that I want to let everybody know is that the author is a graduate of my very own college, Carleton College, Northfield, Minnesota. Way to go. So I was thrilled to read this book and discover how much I enjoyed it. I think it's extremely well written. The minor characters are interesting, just as interesting as the two main characters. It's a great book.
Maybe, Helene, if you're watching, you should meet my mom at the next reunion. Say hi. Okay, so my first question for you is, did you think of our two main characters as the Golem and the Jinni in your head, or as Hava and Ahmad? I thought of them as the Golem and the Jinni. We're going to alternate between saying Jinni and Jinni, because it's supposed to be Jinni, but we're wrong. So I thought of them as their titles instead of their names, because Hava is reasonably accepting of her name, but Ahmad keeps saying, I just want everyone to know, that's not my real name.
Okay. Also, like you, I tended to think of them as the Golem and the Jinni, partly because it's the title of the book, so every time you pick the book up, you know, that's what you're looking at.
And they don't get names until several chapters in.
Partway in, and you also, the author refers to them primarily as the Golem and the Jinni. I mean, when other people talk to them, they will call them Ahmad or Hava, but in the narrative, she uses the not their Christian names, so to speak, but
they're Judeo-Christian names.
Yeah, I don't know what you call it. Okay. That's actually a good point. That the Golem, for those who don't know, is a deep part of Jewish culture, and she after her husband dies, she ends up being sort of adopted by an old rabbi who recognizes her as a golem and is helping her find her way in the new world.
Yeah.
But you get a certain amount of late 19th century Orthodox Judaism and what that life was like.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this might be the tiniest bit of a spoiler. We're going to tell you who the bad guy is. It becomes clearer for different people at different points. So the bad guy is the man who made the golem. Hava's husband didn't build her, he commissioned her from a man named Yehuda Shalman. And he was an interesting guy. I think, so in our culture, we've all kind of accepted that we have this thing called white guilt, which is where like white people kind of feel bad because historically people who look like us have enslaved Africans and massacred Native Americans and broken our treaties with them. And so we just sort of feel bad for being white, and like we need to be nice now to make up for everything in the past. And I think that we also have something, we being not super Christian people, called Christian guilt, where
Protestant guilt is actually,
is that a thing?
That's
Protestant guilt, which makes us sort of sympathetic to sort of like anyone witchy or black magic-y, like anyone who would have been in trouble during the Spanish Inquisition or something like that. So when we first meet Shalman and he basically does black magic, I was like, oh, we're supposed to be sympathetic to this guy because he's going to be mistreated and persecuted for just like his religious beliefs. And so it took me quite a while to accept that he was going to be the bad guy, because at first he does some bad things.
But you actually get some of his background, and I certainly felt sorry for him. I mean, he had a very promising future, and then he suddenly had a dream that he saw as a message from God that he was not a good person. So he dropped out of the school and ran away and started doing some bad things, and actually he just kept getting worse and worse.
Okay, we're gonna stop the non-spoiler part now. So if you haven't read this book, go away, read the book.
It's very good.
Come back. We both gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So spoilers begin now. Okay. So there were a lot of narrative threads. We get introduced to a lot of characters, and they don't super seem connected. And it also doesn't really seem like the Golem and the Jinni are our main characters, because we hear a little bit more about them, but we also hear a lot about Shalman and a New York socialite named Sophia Winston and
the rabbi who was taking Hava in, and his nephew, and
Hava's, and I didn't expect them all to like weave together, particularly Fadwa, who is the sort of I thought that she was just going to be a way to look into Ahmad's past, because the Fadwa scenes are in somewhere in the desert in the Middle East, we don't really know where, in the 7th century before he gets put in the bottle. So I thought we were just going to be able to see his old life through her eyes, but she actually becomes a really important plot point. So was there anything that you didn't like?
Anything I didn't like?
I had one thing that I thought was a little...
You better go first.
Didn't quite like. So Ahmad, since you have read the book, if you're watching this part, right, has an affair with Sophia, the posh New York
very rich,
socialite.
yeah.
And she gets pregnant. That seemed weird to me, and this makes her very sick because, you know, he's not a human.
He's fire. Yeah.
So it's sort of she has been impregnated with fire, and she like has a miscarriage basically, to the extent that you can. And then she's like very cold for the rest of her life, and she, you know, stops going to parties and just sits all day huddled by the fire. And that was not quite making enough sense for me.
Well, I thought it led to an interesting, I mean, she had gotten engaged in there somewhere after having this modest affair with the Jinni. She'd gotten engaged to somebody the way you're supposed to, but they really didn't have very much in common. And she had always been interested in different lands, in different kinds of people. Ahmad
was a dream come true.
So Ahmad was a dream come true, and also he's an incredibly handsome being of fire who can like climb walls and show up on your balcony. But she ends up breaking free of the social structure and the strictures expected of her, and traveling and in exotic lands. So. I mean, I was certainly surprised by that, but it didn't bother me, and it led to her having a happy ending, just like most of the other people. Yeah, I didn't find. I mean, that struck me as a little odd, but in this book there really weren't any things that made me uncomfortable, made me.
Well, the thing that made me uncomfortable, everything Shaman did.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, like, it's not going to be 100% butterflies and happiness if you read this book.
Yeah. There are bad things that happen to bad things that happen to people that we have come to care about, and they mostly have to do with Shaman. Come to think of it,
Shaman in his former life. We can do spoilers now, so you know, Fadwa gets murdered, and so does her father.
In fact, the Jinni.
But yeah,
the Shaman, in his earlier incarnation,
which I don't actually remember his name.
It's Ibn. I can't remember either.
Ibn Malik.
Oh, I think it is Malik.
Yeah. Okay.
As in malice.
Oh.
Yeah. Good. But I didn't get that at the time.
There was one other thing that I didn't. It's not that I didn't like it, but I feel it was a missed opportunity. So Shaman ends up in New York. He follows the Golem there because he thinks she's part of the key to his eternal life. And so he's sort of posing in this shelter, and when he goes to New York, he gets given a different name on Ellis Island, as happened a lot. His Yiddish name was Yehuda Shalman, and on Ellis Island they rename him Joseph Shaul. And Hava first figures out who he is when she sees his name written down, and I think she saw it as Yehuda Shalman, but since she has this multi-linguistic ability, I thought it would have been really cool if his name was written down Joseph Shaul, and then she just saw it as Yehuda Shalman because all languages are the same to her. I thought that would have been really good.
That would have been interesting. Yep, that would have been good. But he's an interesting character. I mean, as we were saying at the beginning, you sort of feel sorry for him, but what happens to him is very satisfying. It turns out this eternal life, he actually did have it. He just didn't know.
Yeah.
Life after life, he has lived trying to grab eternal life, and he does horrible things throughout all his lives. I think we don't hear about most of them, but we hear quite a lot about the bad things that he does as Shaman. So there's a sense of you're pathetic, but
Like you already have what you want.
You
so
already
stop
being
ruining
bad.
everybody's life.
Stop ruining everybody else's life, and yeah, it was fascinating. If, for example, he had rejected that dream that said you don't belong here in this paradise, and instead just continued on with his studies, what would have happened? I don't know. Interesting to think about, but what I really liked about the book, because I like books with happy endings, is generally I read much lighter fiction than Libby does.
Yeah.
Is that there are some good people that you care about that die, but most of the good people that you learn about in the course of the book end up with a life that works. That you know, it's maybe not what they expected, but
and Mahmoud Saleh has both of those. He dies.
He dies,
but he's happy about it.
He's happy about it. He's redeemed. I mean, he's solved a problem, and he's been cured of the illness. That was an interesting thing. Shaman actually cures him of a mental illness. He'd been possessed by a demon.
Yeah.
And cures. I mean, Shaman cures him of this practically as a byproduct. I mean, you know, the demon's just sort of in the way of whatever it is he's trying to get out of the guy's mind.
And I think that Michael, who runs the shelter for newly arrived immigrants, I think it was Michael who said this. So Shellman's sort of hiding out there, and you're supposed to leave after 5 days, but he makes himself indispensable by helping everyone, so they just let him stay. And Michael says, you know, you want to be a bad guy, but you were actually helping those people. Like, he actually found work for newly arrived immigrants while he was trying to just be a bad guy all the time.
Yeah, interesting. Interesting character.
Okay, so that's it for our review. I want to close up by recommending, if you read this book or if this book sounds interesting, and if you ever find yourself in New York, you should check out the Lower East Side Tenement Museum, which is on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and it's an actual 19th century or early 20th century tenement building that's sort of reconstructed like the houses or like the tenements were when people were living there, and you can get tours, and some of them are in character and some of them are out of character. So if you're interested in immigrant life in New York in the early 20th century, that's a really cool place to go.
Yeah, Libby and I went a number of years ago when we were visiting New York City, and we enjoyed it so much we actually did 2 tours. We did one, the sort of basic tour, and then we came back to do the interactive one, at which point you've got a guide who, I mean, she says, okay, you tour group, you're a family who's just gotten off the ship.
Yeah.
I'll take you to my house, my apartment, and then we'll talk about things.
To show you what it's like.
To show you what it's like. So, yeah, a really, really interesting place to visit. Okay.
We're done.